Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. We're going to start with a song like we usually do as more people come on. Thank you all for joining today. Welcome everyone. Welcome. This week, one of the deepest and profoundest sections of the Torah, the famous battle between Yaakov and, for right now, we're going to say an angel. And I'm going to give you the background. The background is after 20 years of Yaakov being in outside of Israel. 1 second, I'm just trying to get comfortable here. After 20 years of being outside of Israel, he is coming back to the land. And Esav is coming to meet him with 400 men. And so Yaakov is not sure of his intentions. And he does three things. He prays, he prepares for war, and he sends gifts to appease Esav. And then, because of fearing what Esav might do, he split his camp into two. And then the Torah says, and Yaakov was left alone, and he fought with a man. And the man could not prevail over Yaakov. And after all-night wrestling match, that's what we'll call it, Yaakov says, I won't let you go until you bless me. And the man / angel blesses him by giving him a new name. He says, you no longer will you be called Yaakov, but you'll be called Yisrael. And then the Torah, very, very significantly, gives a definition of the word Yisrael. And the Torah says, because you contended, you fought with man and God, and you prevailed. And so the Torah is telling us what this word Yisrael means. to contend with God and man and to prevail. So, of course, this is very significant because until this day, we are called by the name Yisrael. The land is called Eretz Yisrael. The people are called the people of Israel. Yet significantly, I think we mentioned this last week, that when Avraham and Sarah's names are changed from Avram to Avraham and Sarai to Sarah, they are always called that. They're never called by their previous names. But here we see for the rest of Yaakov's life, sometimes he's called Yaakov and sometimes he's called Yisrael. So we have to understand that the level, the spiritual level of Yisrael is a very, very high, elevated, refined, almost perfected level. And Yaakov is a human being. And so he, in a sense, goes back and forth from different levels of spirituality. And so sometimes he's called by Yaakov, which is a very high level in of itself. We're going to analyze that a little bit, his name Yaakov. And Yisrael, many times he will be called Yisrael. And those times it has to do much more with his ultimate destiny and how it affects all of Israel for all generations. So, first of all, want to understand that this a name change in the Torah always represents a fundamental and profound change in the person, so much so that their name is changed accordingly. But as we've said in almost every single class, the Torah is archetypal, and everything that is happening to the individuals that we are learning about is prophetic and is also teaching us lessons, every person in every generation. So this name Yisrael, the idea that Yaakov was wrestling, fighting, contending with God and man, and he prevailed, this is a prophetic understanding of what would happen the whole rest of Jewish history. Because we, from the time of Avram, really, the people of Israel have been contending to survive. And this is in every generation. We are challenged to survive. And at the same time, we want to look now just for a second, who exactly was he wrestling with? So we're going to answer 4 different possibilities, and they're all true, and they're all happening simultaneously. So the first is, Yaakov is really fighting with himself. He knows the next day he's meeting Esav, and one way or another, their destiny has to be worked out. And so when he was left alone that night, he's wrestling with his own sense of self-worth, his own sense of what his destiny is, what his potential is, what his inner strengths are. And like we all do, we all wrestle with who we could be, who we are in reality, and what the gap is between them. So Yaakov's fight here is all of our fights. It's a constant type of challenge. Secondly, he is fighting with we'll call it the ghost of, or the image of Esav, who he's going to meet the next day. And he's wrestling as who really deserves the firstborn, who really deserves the blessing that they got from their father, Yitzchak. According to Rashi, he is fighting with the angel, the protective angel of Esav. And we're going to see more about that. And according to tradition, the protective angel or the archangel is none other than what we call in English Satan, in Hebrew Satan. And that's who he's fighting with. He's fighting with the spiritual root of Esav. Now, it's very important to mention here that Satan in Jewish tradition is not an independent force contrary to God. Amazingly enough, Satan is an angel, and he, in a sense, is doing God's bidding by giving human beings free choice. If we had no evil inclination, if we had no possibility of sin or going into the darkness, then we would have no choice of being in the light. We'd have no choice of making the correct decisions, the moral decisions. And so Satan is actually doing God's bidding. He is an angel of God who happens to have the difficult, the complex task of challenging man 24/7. And then fourthly, Yaakov is struggling with God. God, what do you want from me? God, when you promised me at my dream of the ladder to protect me, are you going to come through? Or we could say, potentially, why do bad things happen to good people? This whole series is called Growth Through Torah. So we all, in our own way, at different times, it's not necessarily continual, but there are times where we question God, not in a way of being unfaithful or losing our faith, but as human beings, sometimes we throw up our hands and God, what's going on here? What am I supposed to learn from this? Where am I going to get strength from this? Why am I going through this? These are questions that people ask all the time. They're legitimate questions. And as long as we do it in a respectful way and in a way that we don't lose our faith, in fact, it strengthens our faith that we feel that we can talk directly to God. So here we see is Yaakov is fighting on 4 different levels. So we might ask, well, which one is it? And the answer is simple. It's all of them at the same time. And this speaks about us also. We all have inner struggles. We have existential, philosophical questions about the nature of this world. We all have opposing forces or people that we have a hard time getting along with, that we struggle with emotionally, psychologically. And the name Yisrael, though, means not just that we contend, but that we prevail, that we can be successful. So in the second part of this class, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the word Yisrael and see what we can see within the letters of Yisrael. So I'll mention that one of the most important and deepest understandings of how to understand the words and the meaning of the Torah is through permuting the letters. If you have a word or sometimes a phrase, and it's made up of certain letters, but if we permute, change the order of the letters, well, different words are going to pop out. And so let's relatively quickly look at the word Yisrael and see what we can learn from it. Anyone who maybe has a pen or paper or is looking at the Bible right now. So Yisrael is a Yud, a Shin, a Resh, an Aleph, and a Lamed. So the first thing we see is that the root Shin Resh, Sar, that is the root of to contend. And so we see it one of the meanings of Yisrael is literally you contended with. Aleph and Lamed is the name of God. Sar El, that you contended with God. And of course, that means with the point or the energy of God within us and within other people. So we see all four levels are contained in this idea of contending with God. The word Sar by itself means prince. And this is actually the root of Sarah's name, Sarah. Sarah literally means a princess. Today, in modern Hebrew, in the government, a minister of the cabinet, let's say, is called a Sar. He's like a prince. So this tells us the role of Israel in history, that we are meant to be the representatives of God in this world. And we need to look at ourselves in that role as being that we represent God and Torah in the world. Now, if we take a different permutation of the letters of Yisrael, so we have Yeshar El, which means literally straight to God. So this is a very, very important understanding of the very nature of the relationship between the Jewish people and God. As you may be aware, Judaism is very, very careful and very strong on the idea that we don't have intermediaries between us and God. We have teachers, we have rabbis, we have tzaddikim, righteous people, and we learn from them, and they many times give us advice, and sometimes they even pray for us, but it's never intended that there's anything between a yeshar kel, a straight, direct relationship with God. And this, of course, is very, very important for obvious reasons. A straight connection. And of course, this is the way we look at prayer. Prayer is the activity or the action of connecting ourselves directly to God with no intermediaries. No intermediaries at all. And this is, in a sense, the image of the ladder in Yaakov's dream that we learned about last week, is that Yaakov is on the bottom of the ladder, and God is at the top, and there are angels going up and down. But according to tradition, our thoughts and our actions create angels. And so, without going back to the dream, in a sense, what Yaakov, when he was seeing the angels going up and down, these were in a sense, angels or energies that he had created himself. Now, if you take another permutation of Yisrael, the word Yeshar, if you just permute those letters differently, is Shir, Shin Yud Resh, Shir Kel, the song of God. And this is very, very much connected to the idea of prayer, because perhaps one of the most important gematrias, for those people who don't know what gematria is, every letter in Hebrew has a numerical value. And so when we look at a word, we add up the value of the letters to give us a sum total. And if another word has the same numerical value, we look for connections, obvious connections. So the word in Hebrew for prayer is tefillah, and the word for song is shira. And they both have the same gematria, 515. So from this, we learn something very, very important, that the essence of prayer is song, and the essence of song is prayer. I think everyone has those favorite songs that express the depths of our being. Sometimes they're happy songs, sometimes they're sad songs or melancholy songs or songs of longing. But when we become one with those songs, become one with the music, it's as if we are in a prayerful state. And that's why in the temple in Jerusalem, all of the offerings were accompanied with song. And that's why, at least ideally, in the synagogue today, it should be, it's not always that way, but it should be full of song. Another permutation. We're going through these relatively quickly, but I'm hoping that people will afterwards maybe look at the word Yisrael and remember these and contemplate these and to integrate them deeply. So another permutation of Yisrael is Li Rosh. To me is a head. Rosh means head. Like Rosh Hashanah is the New Year's, literally the head of the year. So this alludes to the idea of the well-known idea that the Jewish people, wherever we have gone, and in whatever area of professional life or the sciences or the arts or economics or politics, medicine, physics, whatever area we talk about, it's uncanny how Jews rise to the top, to the head. And as we maybe have mentioned before, a known fact is that approximately 25% of all Nobel Prize winners are Jewish, even though the population, the Jewish population in the world, is, I believe, something like 1/10 of 1%. So this is not a reason to be arrogant. We're not saying this in an arrogant way, but we've seen it play itself out. And this is encoded in the idea of Li Rosh. To me is a head. And we see in Yaakov's life that his challenges with Esav and with Lavan and just his whole life is challenged that he has to be very smart to stay one step ahead. And the Jewish people have, just to survive, we've had to use our heads. Now, it's very significant that the name Yaakov, I mentioned we'll go back to the name Yaakov, he got his name because he was holding on to the heel of Esav when he came out of the womb. Now, this is very symbolic that the first letter of Yaakov's name is a Yud. Yud is the first letter of God's most essential name, the four-letter name of God. But the rest of the name of Yaakov is Ekev, which means heel. So this means the Yud represents the divine soul, and the heel, the Ekev, represents the body. And so Yaakov represents like the ladder of the way to bridge the gap between the bottom of the ladder and the top of the ladder, between physicality and spirituality, between the body and the soul. And so here we see Yaakov is the Ekev, is the lowest part of the body. Li Rosh, to me, is a head, which is a permutation of Yisrael, is the top of the body. So here we see in these two names part of the struggle of Yaakov. That's why sometimes he's called by the name Yaakov, and sometimes he's called by the name Yisrael. And again, this is our story. This is the story of every Jew and every human being, of the constant struggle. When we use the word struggle, it doesn't necessarily mean something negative. Many times struggling is difficult. There's no doubt about it. But here, struggle can also mean challenge, and challenges can be turned into opportunities, and opportunities can be turned into triumphs. So this is the archetypal energies that we're dealing with this name change. So one last thing, one of the participants mentioned last week a very beautiful name in the 5 letters of Yisrael is the first letters of all of the patriarchs and the matriarchs. The Yud is Yaakov and Yitzchak. Their names begin with the Yud. The Shin, or Sin, is for Sarah. The Resh is for Rachel and Rivka. The Aleph is Abraham, and the Lamed is Leah. So here we see that the name Yisrael is a composite, is a collective representation of all of Israel, because we all come from the patriarchs and the matriarchs. So I want to end with one last thing, an amazing numerical value. Is we said before that according to Rashi, who gets it from the Midrash, that Yaakov was fighting with the angel, the archangel of Esav, and that is Satan. And if you take the numerical value of Satan and the numerical value of Yaakov, and you add them together, it equals Yisrael, which is an amazing idea. So in other words, that this wrestling match between Yaakov and Satan produced Yisrael. Now, what does that mean for us? It means that one of the hardest things in the world, one of the worst things in the world, is to feel one is struggling for no reason. for no reason. It's unfair. I'm being singled out. I'm a victim. I don't see any point to my struggles. But here we're learning that when we struggle, when we deal with challenges, and we're able to overcome them, then we rise to a new level. So this is a very, very important idea in life in general, that struggle, like I said, sometimes doesn't feel good. But here we're learning at the end of the night, the end of the day, Yaakov becomes Yisrael because of his struggle, because of the tests that he went through, just like Avram and Yitzchak went through many, many tests. And Yaakov also, that because of that, we can reach new levels of understanding and just a whole new way of being. So I will end with a blessing to all of us, that we're able to turn challenges and struggles into opportunities, and opportunities into triumphs. So thank you all very much. As we usually do at this point, we ask people if they want to unmute and ask questions. I see on the screen now, Israel 365 is reaching out to everyone. So if everyone could just take a minute to read their message here. And I do very, very much want to encourage people. Every day there are classes around this time, a number of classes every single day. And the more people participate, the more we all learn, the more we all grow. Okay, so if anyone, actually I have to be honest, out of the corner of my eye, I saw there was a lot of chats going on, and I can't concentrate on teaching and reading the chats and responding to them. But it seemed that people were asking questions and going back and forth. So if anyone wants to take this opportunity to share any of that, I'm certainly open to that. Anyone out there? If so, you have to unmute.
Just think about it.
Okay, I don't hear anyone. I will look in the chats to see what people were saying. And as always, I appreciate people coming. And hopefully you will continue to come, and that you will also take advantage of all the other classes. Okay?
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay. Thank you. It's a lot to assume.
Maybe I'm wrong. Are the unmute buttons working?
Yes.
Yes,
I don't
they are
hear
working.
anyone
They're working.
saying anything.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you,
Rabbi.
Okay,
Thank you.
very good.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming,
Good.
and see
Thank
you
you so
next
much.
time.
Thank you.
Thank you
so
for
much.
answering my question about Jacob's